Good morning, Dominique Nicole here with Divorcing.com, where I help women gain the courage, clarity, and confidence to help them thrive, survive their divorce, and save them thousands of dollars in the process. And today I am sitting at Andersen Law with my friend and also somebody that has consulted with me on my own personal issues, Beth Andersen. Good morning, Beth.
Good morning.
Nice to have you here.
Yeah, nice to be here.
And I love going to Beth for, I've gone to her for a lot of personal, situations where I just need advice. And I've also sent a lot of my clients to her. And she's so gracious in, giving them some really good advice and getting them on the right foot. And Beth also offers complimentary initial consultations for divorce, which, is truly valuable for my clients and for a lot of people out there. So something to keep in mind. Beth, just before we get started, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you do and why you do it and how long you've been doing it.
Okay, great. Well, my law firm is Andersen Law PC. I have one employee and the rest are contractors. We have other attorneys, paralegal, and legal assistants who work together so that we can stay on top of all our cases. I got into family law when I got divorced. And I had done some family law before, but I came from a corporate background, and I also came from working for legal services. So one, I felt like it was an elite practice, and the other, I felt like we learned how to get things done really quickly and affordably. And those were the missing ingredients, I thought, in family law. Number one, either it wasn't the excellence that I was used to, not I had a good attorney, but just in the field in general, in terms of being responsive to your clients.
Right.
And then just being transparent, affordable, giving options, and being collaborative. Those were things that seemed to be missing, so those are important to me.
Yeah, and I think that's what really drew me to you because I met you through Joan Rogliano.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's the one that put me in touch with you.
Oh, great.
And what I loved about it was, so many attorneys, they require this huge retainer when you're going through the process. And for a lot of people, and especially a lot of women, and maybe those women haven't worked in years, coming up with a huge retainer is very restrictive and a little bit scary. And so I love that you're able to sort of offer, you call them like your bundled packages?
Yeah, we have unbundled legal services. And what that means is it's almost like a la carte. You pay as you go. And so that allows us to have a smaller retainer and be more flexible. Not only for people who want the smaller retainer or need it, but some people, they just want more control over their divorce. They don't want us just running out and doing everything, so we can work collaboratively, and it gives you the reins, and when you need us, we're there, even to go to court. And if you don't ask us to do something, you can do it yourself.
Yeah, and I love that about you because it was like just last year you helped me with... My second divorce was almost 7 years ago now, which is really hard to believe. But I knew enough about family law going through 2 divorces myself and just doing what I do for a living where I don't want to have to pay someone to do stuff that I could do.
Yeah.
But, I'm not an attorney, right? So there was some advice that I needed and you were there for me for that. So I ended up just saving so much money throughout that whole process. And
great.
That was very valuable.
Well, and I'm not in the mental health field, so I redirect people to people like you for that kind of help too. That's not our expertise. Even though lawyers are counselors and we're here to listen, there comes a point where your money and time are better spent with an expert in those fields.
Yeah, it takes a village almost, divorce.
It's been accused of being a cottage industry where there are so many experts that can weigh in, so you have to be very selective.
Yeah.
And it reminded me when I got divorced of when I got married that I really didn't know what was going on. All I knew was I had to keep writing checks. And it never seemed to stop.
Right.
It was just this process carrying you away.
Right.
You're like, when is it going to end?
Yeah. No, and that's a very common theme and a big frustration for a lot of people. And then just tracking the statements and the time and trying to account for what all this even means, when I'm writing these big checks. But we're here today because we kind of wanted to talk about, with the holidays in place, I thought it would be really helpful to share with you guys some of the main concerns that tend to crop up during the holidays, whether you're just now separating or you're actually in the divorce process. Is that going to actually show up? apologize for that. I'm a popular person. But, different topics that arise around the holidays that make it very difficult for families that are about to start the process of divorce or are going through the divorce. And so I was really hoping to get some insight from you and some expert advice from a legal standpoint on, sharing parenting time around the holidays.
Right.
And I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't organized. They don't really have a parenting plan quite in place yet, or they deviate from that.
Right.
And so at the last minute, here you've planned to have like little Johnny for Christmas, but now, your ex is wanting to take him on some cruise because some Expedia deal came on, and
right.
It can create a lot of stress. So what do you see in those situations within your practice? And I guess what would you recommend to people to avoid that and really protect the kids that are kind of the pawns and in the middle of that tug of war?
Right. And I just am thinking of one of the lawyers who worked with me, and he said in law school, whenever it was a family law question, he would just his professor said, just say best interest of the children. And as a law student, that was his go-to. And that's the truth is that should be your go-to, is what's best for the kids. And we even had talked about, you want to be reasonable. The judges aren't there to see who's the best at lawyering, who's the trickiest, who can push those agreements as far as possible. They don't want someone shooting for the fences and trying to manipulate the situation and then running into court and saying it's an emergency. Just be reasonable, focus on the kids, and that's basically your compass for whatever you decide to do. And I have some pointers on that. But if you keep coming back to how does this affect the children, and is this really what's best for them, keeping in mind you want them out of the negotiations. You can talk to them and get their point of view, but they don't make the decision, and they don't get to hear about all these negotiations and fights.
Right.
Just protect them.
Right.
So I would say that's the first step, is to focus on the kids and think about what's best for them. It's time to be a grown-up, and we've all been there where you're doing some sort of holiday event. I'll never forget chopping down a Christmas tree, and my heart was broken, and I just had the biggest fake smile pasted on my face, like, isn't this
I think
great?
We've all been there. Right.
So that's the first step, is how does this affect the kids above and beyond your family, the whole extended vacation plans, the cruise tickets. You really got to redirect to that, because that's what the judge will do. It's in the statute.
Right.
And then the second thing is plan ahead, because guess what? The judge or whoever is your decision maker, they don't consider it an emergency that you got those cruise tickets, or your mom wants you over for Thanksgiving at the last minute, or whatever it is.
Right.
So try to plan ahead, a few months ahead, really, and start thinking about what's the holiday that's coming up. Do we have it worked out? What's fair? What's best for the kids? And then finally, communicate. So I would say use things like Talking Parents. There's Our Parenting Wizard. These are apps, and there's probably other new ones now, and you want to use those to really get a conversation going about what's best for the kids, so that you're both on the same page with the details.
Yeah, and I love those apps because, there's calendars on there so that everyone knows when little Johnny's soccer is and whose weekends, belongs to who. And also, part of the parenting plan and the separation agreement is within that parenting plan, isn't it, to establish like every other, the wife gets every other Christmas or every Father's Day. And so really that stuff should be established ahead of time. And it's just about getting people to really stick and be respectful to that schedule.
Yeah, the certainty works better. That's something I see a lot, is that you want to be cool, you want to be flexible, and then it turns into a problem because you've got what the agreement says and then what you're doing, and they're not the same. And that's a lose-lose, because either of you could go to court and say, well, we're really doing this, or this is what the agreement says, but we're really doing that. And it's not a good place to be. I've had clients, especially if they're kind of like hippies or they think they're very cool, and they'll be like, oh, we'll just figure it out later. We don't want to write it down. Then they give me the phone call later. The agreements are for when you're not getting along.
Right.
So better to have it there. And then if you get along, you can vary it and back it up with an email. But when in doubt, default to the agreement. It's always better, and people don't like to do it, but in my own divorce, we actually would modify the agreement and file it with the court every year, and I think it helped us because we had something certain.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Having that in place ahead of time, and with me, and I'm sure you see this too, you could have a very amicable relationship with your ex, going through the process and feel like you can trust them and work together. But the bottom line is divorce, much like money, changes a lot of people.
Yep. Yeah.
So if you have that in writing, it's really in both your best interests. And I don't care how well you get along. I run into this all the time with my clients, and I ran into it within my first marriage. Just have it in writing. Work together as much as possible, but have it in writing. And the kids need that consistency, and they need to know, I think, each year what to expect.
Right. And you can be flexible, and you should. Again, you're not trying to shoot for the fences and say, get everything my way or the highway.
Right.
You can be flexible. You can put that in writing. But when you don't get along, you default back to the plan.
Exactly.
And another thing about those apps like Talking Parents or Our Parenting Wizard, I've heard it said, oh, lawyers love those because you can print it out and take it to court. And that is true. But the reason I like it that you can print it out and take it to court is that it makes people calm down so that they're more respectful. There's less cursing, bossing each other around, saying embarrassing things, because you know darn well you can't erase it.
Exactly.
Because most lawyers I know, the good ones in family law, we don't want to encourage people running into court all the time. What we want is a good agreement that keeps you out of the courtroom, because you can handle it yourself. There's going to be plenty of cases for good lawyers. We don't need to drum up business with bad agreements and fighting. And it's the last thing you want is a really bad text or email or Facebook post being read aloud in front of the judge by your own client or by an attorney in front of a courtroom full of people. So keep that in mind, and then you will communicate more maturely, more professionally, and it just makes everything go better.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. So I would encourage you guys to look up those apps, and there's several out there, but Our Parenting Wizard is the one that I'm super familiar with.
Yeah.
Anyway, something for you guys to check out. And while we're, on topic about the holidays, what about travel, in the holidays? And, I know for me, I've had clients get really frustrated because the ex won't communicate where they're going on vacation or where they're staying, and is their phone time allowed, communication allowed during that time. So what do you run into there or suggest?
Well, for people who hung in this long on the video, I am going to give one of my strategies that I, in the past, have only given to my clients, which is if you want to get something effectively done in communication with your spouse, you say what you want to happen, okay? And then you give them a reasonable deadline to get back to you, and then you say, if you don't get back to me, I'm going to assume it's going the way I want it to happen. And it's very different than just saying, when do you think we should go on vacation? Or I'm going on a cruise, is that okay? No, you say, I would like the kids to go to California with me. We would leave on the 21st and get back on the 26th. This is consistent with the parenting plan. Let me know in 7 days, and give them a lot of notice, if this is okay. If I don't hear otherwise, in 7 days, I'll assume it's an okay.
Right.
That's the best way to really put someone in a position where they default to agreeing with you. Now, people are tricky, so they come up with ways to get around it. They get back a day later, oh, I never saw the email, I didn't get the text, or, oh, yeah, I say no the final day. But the odds are more in your favor. And then if they do give you trouble like that, again, if you have a go-to communication place, like Our Parenting Wizard or Talking Parents or something like that, they can't use that excuse, oh, I didn't get the text. Well, you're supposed to look there.
Right.
So that helps you.
Yeah, that's a great
point. And then
it's,
well, you missed the deadline if you are stuck with a decision maker going into court, you did it the right way and they didn't. So that helps. And then even in those times where two people are being difficult, it did pinpoint the issue. If someone wants to be a brat, I call it, or just be difficult, they always can. But that's just a communication tip, and you have to be very precise. Just to recap, You give them what you want, not what they want. You give them a reasonable deadline, and then you say, if I don't hear from you, we're defaulting to what I want. And because you're being reasonable, it's very effective.
Yeah, no, that's not adversarial at all. I really like that. And then, again, the importance of just documenting rather than having phone conversations so that you have a paper trail.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. In law, they say if you don't have it in writing, it didn't happen.
Right. Right.
So you really do need to do that and take that extra time, and you can still be friendly and communicative. If there's a protection order or something involved, or you guys just can't communicate, there are other things that you can use. Sometimes you can have communication just for issues about the kids, and again, you'd need something like an app to make sure it stays that way.
Right.
I've even seen people have a third party can screen the communications. It's sad when it has to be a lawyer because we're so expensive.
Yeah.
But maybe even a divorce coach can go through them with you.
Right.
Not just to make sure that you're not abused by really obnoxious communication in your direction, which can be poisoning to the reader, but also to hold you accountable, because it's so tempting to want to sound like a lawyer or a therapist,
right.
and oh, you need to do this, and
right.
this is how you communicate.
Right.
I know personally how hard it is. It's easy to tell our clients be perfect,
right,
but to do it is very hard.
It is. Emotions
so
are high.
Again, you can involve a third party who's going to keep things confidential to get involved and protect you if there's a protection order or something like that. That's a time you should probably call an attorney, because the last thing you want to do is violate a protection order and get into trouble
right.
with the communication.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sitting here thinking about the app, and really it just seems so much more effective than email. And would you suggest somebody maybe writing into the separation agreement that both parties are to check that app daily for any communication, and that way if there is some sort of breakdown down the road, you can say, well, I told you which dates I would be back, and it's on the app, whereas email can kind of get lost.
Yeah, that's another reason, because people change their email, or they say they
right.
didn't get it.
Just
and then,
like
of course, they
excuses.
can delete it. Yeah, there's so many more excuses, and again, it's that communication. And we do write about those apps in our agreements as attorneys, and it's been recommended.
That's smart.
Initially, no one liked the apps, and I was, no one likes those, I don't want to use them. And then as time went by, I saw the efficacy, and that it also works on a phone, so it is almost the same as texting. So I encourage it, and who knows what new technologies will come along. But for now, those are great. You should write about them. It's interesting how often to check. It's got to be reasonable for your family.
Right.
Some people travel internationally.
Right.
Or they're in a work location where they can't check. But you just have to come up with ways that people can get in touch with you and be reasonable.
Right. And if you're dealing with, a narcissistic spouse or someone where you just don't communicate really effectively,
right.
It just takes all of that emotion out of it, and it allows it to be more business and thus child focused,
Right. Yeah, it is.
Productive, I guess,
yes,
is a good word.
Yeah, and there's all different types of relationships and different ways of communicating, and if someone wants to manipulate, they can, and they will. And I've found in my practice that people do things for these motivations that they don't even know they have.
Right.
Despite their best efforts.
Right.
That's what's so sad.
Right.
And so maybe they can't check themselves, and they're going to continue to communicate in an inappropriate way. But at least this is taking a lot out of the equation, so it'll be minimized.
Right. Right.
Yep.
I agree.
So out-of-state travel, you usually need the other parent's permission, so you need to get that done in writing beforehand. International travel, you usually need a letter signed by the other parent, so you need to get that in hand ahead of time. And then there's the issue of the passports and who keeps them.
Right.
So it takes a lot of planning to work these things out. What you shouldn't do is just go and not tell the other person you're going out of state. You can get away with it. I've seen it where people get away with those trips, and it's very hard to catch them. But it's the wrong thing to do. The risks are very high. What if something happens on that trip and you are out of violation? You're in violation.
Oh, yeah.
So I wouldn't take any chances with that. You just follow the plan. You get the other person's permission. You do it in time. And then if there's a fight about it, hopefully you have something in your agreement to work it out if you don't agree.
Right. Right. Yeah. So I think that's a very important thing that everyone should add when they have kids in their separation agreement. That, and then sharing itineraries.
Yeah, that's common that you would share the itinerary and where you are. Some people will want to know who is the other person traveling, and that can get into that messy area. Oh, I don't want you traveling with your new
the other woman,
significant other, or
right,
what have you.
right.
But really, again, just redirect it to the kids. That if they're safe, it's really not your business who's in that relationship. As long as the kids are safe, there's
Right.
not a clear-cut issue. If there is an issue, like they have an arrest record or something abusive, then
Sure.
you may have to do some investigation. But as long as they're a safe third party, it's really not your business whether they're coming on those trips a lot of the time, and the courts don't care.
Right.
The main thing is, if the courts don't care when you're married, they probably won't get super excited about it now that you're divorced. It's not like,
Exactly.
oh, well, now you're divorced, let's just, open a courtroom for you, and every time you guys have a little spat, we have nothing better to do than
Right.
just
We're just going to assign
stop-
a judge to your case.
stop the
Yeah.
wheels of justice. You know what? They didn't care about your petty fights when you were together, and they don't care now. And
Right.
I think that's the biggest mistake, is that people think, I'll get those calls a week of the holidays. Well, we were on our way to Texas, and he said no, and I need the judge to say yes. Sometimes the judge will pick up a call, but often they won't.
Right.
They're getting busier. It's getting harder.
Right. And especially with it being that time of year, which is really right before divorce season, like right now. It's coming upon us. We generally find that most divorces are filed is the month of March, I want to say. Like March 7th is the biggest filing day.
Yeah, I don't know the biggest
Yeah,
filing day.
it's like
and
March
my schedule-
7th.
Yeah, my schedule has varied. So that's interesting. Cause
I think it's tax time.
I was
They're
gonna
getting their
say-
tax refund back, and we're going to use our tax refund on a divorce
I was
this
going
year.
to say that, but that would be in April, because I do get that a lot.
Yeah.
As soon as I get my tax refund, I'm filing. I hear that a lot. Which, okay, that was your money to begin with. You didn't need to make an interest-free loan to the government to get that money set aside for your divorce.
I think it's that, and then it's just, after the holidays, and I guess I want to kind of wrap this up with, do you file for divorce before or after the holidays? I mean,
Right.
is there any, emotionally, we all know it's probably best to keep the family intact and just get through the holidays, as difficult as it might be, and then just drop the D word after. But are there things that we should take into consideration, that people should take into consideration in terms of tax consequences, or why it might be better to do it before the holidays or to do it after the holidays?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very common question. And one of the answers is going to sound like some of the others, is you have to live your life. When you do a huge decision based on what you think the law will produce, you're speculating much of the time. You don't know for sure. For example, at the end of the year, there might be a tax deduction for maintenance, which is alimony, going away. And so you might think, well, I'm going to hold off because I don't want to pay tax on that maintenance I'm getting, or I'm going to file because I want that tax break. But there's so many moving pieces. For example, the legislature of Colorado might change their law. You might not know how long the divorce is going to go. So I would say consult with an attorney. That's a great time for a free consult on some of those issues. I would definitely say that's a time to pick up the phone.
Right.
But also, you gotta live your life and figure it out. So if it's horrible there, you're in a crucible, it's just you're going off on each other, risk of violence, you got to get out of that
it's never a good
situation
time to
no
wait.
matter what. And
Right.
those are the emergency calls I usually get during the holidays. Are you've got all these bad factors, like everyone's home from work. There might be credit card debt happening because of the holidays. That's common. You're all close together, maybe family coming, sometimes drinking, or all these different pressures. The kids are home, and there's